That would be good.
I have a quick question. Is this all right with me and Ed, or should he be on his own phone?
No, I think it's fine. And we can see you pretty good there too.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good view. Yep. All right. So I'd like to see, we'll do introductions. My name's Athena. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I'm also the Central Mass Regional Coordinator for MOAR, which is Massachusetts Organization for Addiction Recovery. And I'll just go down the list. Marianne, do you want to introduce yourself?
And I'm Marianne Pringulis, and I do MOAR too, Massachusetts Organization for Addiction Recovery, and I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I happen to be the executive director of MOAR.
Awesome. Marianne, your microphone is low. I don't know if it's...
That is interesting. Okay, let's see what I
Is anybody else hearing it low as well? Or is it just me?
Yep, it was low.
Okay.
Right, let me check here.
All right, we heard you, but it was lower than I usually hear you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, now
so,
it's going to be at 100%.
Rebecca?
It's at 100%. Is that better?
I think it's maybe, I don't know. It's about the same, but it's just lower than I usually hear you on the Zoom. So, yeah. Rebecca?
Hi, Rebecca Zwicker, woman in recovery and program director of NOAA, No One Walks Alone Recovery Center in Whitensville.
Awesome. Lori?
I'm Lori Hout. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and I also work at NOAA Recovery Support Center.
Awesome. Ed A.
Hi, I'm Ed. I'm a man in recovery and a volunteer member at the NOAA Support Recovery Center.
Awesome. And Matt, and is it Ed there with you as well? Go ahead.
I'm Matt. I'm a man in recovery and the engagement coordinator at the NOAA Recovery Center.
Okay.
Ed?
Hi, I'm Ed A., a man in recovery. I'm a volunteer at the NOAA Recovery Center in Whitensville.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for being here with us tonight.
We missed Carrie.
Oh, did I miss Carrie? I'm sorry, Carrie.
That's okay. I'm Carrie. I'm Carrie Slazak. I'm also a woman in long-term recovery, and I too work at the No One Walks Alone Recovery Center in Whitensville.
Thank you, Carrie. Every time the participant list changes, every time somebody speaks, so as I'm going down the list and then somebody speaks and the order gets all mixed up. Sorry about that, Carrie.
It's okay. No worries.
Now I got to do this thing that I'm not very good at when I'm doing two things at once, but we will start it. So Rebecca had contacted me and said that folks want to do recovery messaging training. And I just, to start the training, I want to talk about a little bit about MOAR and what MOAR does. Does somebody want to take a shot at reading the mission statement to the left of the slide there?
I will. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
The MOAR mission: to organize recovering individuals, families, and friends into a collective voice to educate the public about the value of recovery from alcohol and other addictions.
Thanks, Lori. Let's just unpack that a little bit and what that means and what that looks like and why is it important. So to organize recovering individuals, families, and friends into a collective voice to educate the public about the value of recovery from alcohol and other addictions. Do we think that's important? And you guys, it's a small enough group. Just feel free to shout it out. I'm not going to pay attention to hands tonight.
Very important.
Why? Oh. You want to talk a little bit more about that? Why it's important, Matt? Or anybody else? Well, who's going to do it if we don't do it?
I was going to say that, to me, that's kind of the most important voice is my own, coming from a man in recovery. And I know just for myself, it wasn't easy being out there as a drug user. And it made it even harder to come in and get treatment because of that. So.
Right.
And the changes that we want to make, or the changes that we want to be made for ourselves and for our community, need public support too, or are helped along by public support. And so if we can share with the public the value of recovery and the value of the support or services that we're asking for, then they can jump on board and advocate for us as well, or be more likely to help us.
Right. And also, you know, the words that stick out for me is collective voice, and that's really, really important. So it's really important that when we're advocating, when we're educating, that we're speaking in like one language that folks understand, and we're together in a movement. Sometimes when movements get too many agendas, or people start speaking in different ways, it complicates the issue, right? So we really want to speak. We really want to organize those folks and people in recovery, families and individuals, into this one voice that we're all speaking together. And together, we're what? Stronger, right? So if we have this one voice, we're all speaking in a unified voice, we're much stronger. And we all already know the value of recovery. I'm sure that NOAA will be the best kept property on that street, because we are valuable to our communities. And that's what happened when recovery comes into communities. We are assets to communities, and we're valuable. And people sometimes give us pushback, but once they get to know us, and we care about things. So I know the NOAA Recovery Center that you just showed us brings huge value to that community. Does anybody else want to have anything to add to that? Okay, does somebody want to read the MOAR vision that's on the right side of this? Anybody? Do you want me to do it? You're going to be hearing from me a lot tonight. I thought I'd give somebody else a shot.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
The MOAR vision. MOAR envisions a society where addiction is treated as a public health issue and recovery is recognized as valuable to all our communities.
Awesome. So that's really important that we treat it as a public health issue. Has it always been treated that way in the past? How have people viewed it?
Criminalized.
Yeah, or a moral failing, right? So we really think it needs to be important. It needs to be a public health issue, and you know we're going in that direction, but and we already know, we just talked about how valuable recovery is to communities like NOAA and all the other recovery centers that are in the state of Massachusetts. So when we first started, I heard a lot of folks introducing themselves, and most, I think, have taken this training because you know, you all seem to do it in the recovery way, which was awesome. But let's just kind of talk about the different ways that we as people in recovery hear people introduce themselves and what that does. So does somebody want to try to does anybody have a pathway of 12-step that wants to use, just read the first 12-step way and fill in the blank with your name?
Sure. Many times I have been in meetings and I have said, my name is Lori and I'm an alcoholic.
Right. So what do folks think about now? If you were the guy that ran a local pizza shop that is everybody goes to after your AA meeting, and you're hearing a group of people identify themselves as alcoholics or addicts, and how do you react? Do you like make sure you have clench your pocketbook? Are you going to make sure your wallet's still in your back pocket when they left? What are your thoughts about that? Like, do you know if somebody's in recovery or if they're still using? When Laurie identified that way, do you know what her recovery status is?
No, to me, it's up in the open, you know.
Right.
And even till this day, I hear those addict and I hear alcoholic, and it's just a natural thought in my head is you know, they're troubled, you know, they cause a lot of trouble type of a deal, you know?
Right. Right. Because that's the stigma that's associated with it, right? We're going on to the stigma one, using stigma. Does somebody want to take a shot at reading this one out loud? Oh, sorry, guys.
I think it said, my name is Matt and I am a junkie, a lush, etc.
Right. So have we heard this before?
Disgusting.
We've heard this, right? And that's not very, you know, we're trying to, we're advocating for recovery. And if I was in front of a legislator and I said, you know, like for instance, Rep O'Day, you know, we know he's in recovery, but if I went to Rep O'Day and identified as somebody, my name's Athena and I'm a junkie, and we think you should get a bill to push for recovery coaching. I mean, would he really want to hear from me when I identify that way? And what would he know about me? Am I still using? Am I in recovery? Right? So that there's a lot of confusion for folks that just, again, doesn't talk about, they're still very unclear about my recovery status when I identify like that. And then there's the recovery way. Does somebody want to take a shot at this?
Nope, black.
Who's doing it?
I call Carrie.
Carrie, do you want to do it?
Yep, I'm gonna move the picture. Okay. My name is Carrie and I am a person in long-term recovery, which for me means that I have not used alcohol or drugs in 16 years.
Is anybody confused where Carrie is in her recovery?
Nope.
Is it clear that she's not an alcoholic, an active alcoholic or addict, and that she's not a lush or a junkie? So can people see the difference between these and why it's important that we identify in the recovery way when we're speaking to the general public and advocating? And not just for the general public, I mean, our families, our friends. I always tell this story when I do this training about even when I was in about 5 years in recovery, my mother questioned why I go to meetings still. And I responded to my own mother that, Mom, I'll be an addict for the rest of my life. And so what do you think my mother felt like when my message was like that versus, Mom, I'm a person in recovery, and to sustain that recovery, but I said, Mom, I will be an addict for the rest of my life. What was the message that my mother may have heard? Oh,
There's no hope.
right. like
Okay.
when is this nightmare gonna end, right? Pretty much. It's the last thing a parent wants to hear after they've, or anybody, a loved one wants to hear when they've lived through your active addiction, right? So people can see that clearly, right? The difference. So why do you think we do that? Why is this recovery messaging important? You guys can all take yourself off mute and just like have a conversation here, because we're a small group.
Help break stigma.
Right,
Focus on the positive.
right.
And shows
Just
that
share.
recovery.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I was just going to say, it shows that recovery is possible. You know, we don't have to talk about what drug we used or what substance caused us to be in recovery. We're just saying we're in recovery. And it goes back to that first thing you said about the collective message. You know, we're all using the same language and sharing the same sort of message of positivity and hope.
Very good. That's great.
For me, it's it allows me to walk around in my community with my head held high. and it allows me to feel comfortable being a part of my community.
Yeah, that's great, Matt. Such a difference, right? When you identify without using stigmatizing language. You know, it is, you can almost hold your head up high because recovery feels good. It really does, right? So, all right. So why do we just
Back it up just
talk?
one more second.
Yes.
Yeah. Just two things. The piece about my name is, and I'm a person in recovery, which for me means it defines it. You're not just saying I am in recovery. It defines it. So if it means for you that I haven't had a drink or a drug in 15 years, or I'm on medication assisted treatment, which is allowing me to focus and not use alcohol or other drugs, you're explaining what it is. The other piece, though, I would want for people to know is that if you happen to be in a 12-step meeting, we're not saying to identify yourself as, my name is Sally, and I'm an alcoholic, because that's the culture there, and everybody knows what you're saying. But outside of the meeting, it's a little different.
Thank you, Mary Ann, because many years ago, I attempted to go in and change all the 12-steppers in their meetings, and that doesn't go over very well. I said, let me tell you what I heard. I heard that you guys are doing this all wrong, and that didn't get over very well. But I do talk to people of 12-step and just remind them that this messaging is really for when you step outside of the rooms of 12-step fellowship. So don't attempt to go in there and change everybody. You'll get booed out like I did. Anyways, so why do we do messaging? So 63, these numbers, I believe this is data is quite old now, but I believe this is much higher now because people are really becoming more aware of addiction. But this is, I believe, older data. So at the time, 63% of Americans have been affected by addiction. And I almost feel like it's safe to say almost everybody knows somebody. So, you know, you don't have to be, family, friends. So I think that's why I think that 63% is low. 67% of Americans believe that there is stigma towards people in recovery. We talked about that here tonight already. Several of you mentioned stigma, right? 74% of Americans say that attitudes and policies must change. So we see that now. We know there's a lot of things that people are just fed up with, and Americans are saying policies must change around a lot of stuff. So we're seeing that. So we know those numbers are high. I'm sorry. So what exactly is a message? This is recovery messaging training. What exactly is in a message? I'll give you the answer then. If nobody's gonna tell me the answer, I'm gonna give you the answer. There it is, boom. It's an exchange of information using words. It's the most important information you want your listener to hear. It's crucial you know what to say and leave it in people's minds. So this is really important as we're entering Recovery Month, and I think this is why Rebecca wanted to do this training. And I know at MOAR, we're planning our statewide day, and we have so many speakers that, you know, if everybody went on and on and on up there, we'd have, it might be more than a one-day event people have very short time up at the microphone, and we want people to exchange the information, and we want them to put that real information, the most important information out there. But they have to do it in a very small amount of time. And that may be what's happening on your recovery walk as well. There's a schedule that the staff is putting together. So it's really crucial that you know prior to you get the microphone in your hands, prior to that time, it's crucial that you know what you want to say and what you want to leave in people's minds. So with that information, let's talk about some things that might be things that you might want to talk about on your, as you're practicing recovery messaging at your event. What are some of the things you want people in your community to know?
Something from me is that there's hope for all of us. No matter how, bad so and so thinks we are, or there's hope.
That there's hope. What else?
There are people out there to support you when you're in recovery.
Right. What else do you think it's important to tell people about recovery?
It's awesome.
That it's possible.
Right. There's a lot of things. I mean, something's coming up big in November 3rd. What do people in recovery do? We vote.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
What else? We go back to college, we get degrees, right? We have families. So there's a lot. What else do you think it's important to tell people about recovery?
There needs to be change.
Say it again.
We need change.
We need change. What did you
Not
say?
money.
That you're a mom?
That I'm a mom.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right? That you're raising your children. Exactly. Anything else?
We're employable.
Yes. Yes, and we pay taxes.
Yes.
Lots of them.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Change
A
policy.
homeowner.
A homeowner. Awesome.
That's great.
Okay.
If I
So,
could just say one thing about the hope, I will never forget, like when we were in the early days of doing our meetings, and mothers would come, and they would hear people share their stories, and it would be like, you give me hope, my son, and if he doesn't, at least I have hope that you're doing well today. So it's like being able to get the strength.
thank you. Exactly. Thank you. All right. Let's see. All right. Oh, you know what I was trying to do? I was trying to mute some of the people and I couldn't because I'm not the host. Durr. Okay. I'm sitting here saying, where did that darn mute button go for folks? Okay. I was trying to cut out some of the background noise. Okay. Okay. We're moving on. So what is recovery messaging? We're talking about this still. We're talking about, and there is Marianne Frangoulis and she is talking about recovery all the time. I don't know if you know this about Marianne, but Marianne is the biggest recovery cheerleader. And I think all of New England, well, maybe the US, I don't know. She's one of the biggest cheerleaders for recovery. You know what? She was cheering for recovery and cheering for us before a lot of us even got here, so it was nice when I got to recovery and I got to meet Marianne. I learned like, wow, you're the one that was making a lot of the things happen before I even got here. So that was great. But she's a big advocate for recovery. And that's usually how you'll see her at a podium talking about recovery. So what is recovery messaging? Again, this is MOAR's mission. It's to organize recovering individuals, families, and friends into a collective voice to educate the public about the value of recovery from alcohol, drugs. Carrie, you had mentioned this again, how that collective voice, right? This is it. Recovery messaging is your opportunity to tell your recovery story and fulfill the MOAR mission. So this is part of the MOAR mission. We're all members of MOAR, right? So this is what we're doing. We're fulfilling the mission by telling our recovery story, and we're doing it in that collective voice. I'm moving on here. I have two things. So when we're doing the recovery messaging, who do you think we're talking to?
Public.
Right, let's be more specific.
community leaders,
Right.
families, loved ones,
Right.
people in recovery.
I told you that story about my mother. I wasn't doing recovery messaging back then. But right, families are important. Who else?
Business owners.
Right.
Law enforcement.
Employers.
Who was that?
Employers.
Employers, absolutely, right? They said, I heard somebody talk about, I was at a meeting recently and somebody was talking about employers that hire people in recovery, and they were saying, hey, maybe they have to go every day at noontime. They may have to go somewhere, but when they come back at 1 o'clock, they're going to be the best. They're going to be the best employee on the job. So, you know, because sometimes we need that, you know, that meeting in the middle of the day, right? So great. So here we go. We are talking to individuals, to groups, a school, a close friend or friends, professional relationships, at a class or at a training, people in recovery, at a convention, legislators, and you guys named several more. You can talk to anybody, I think, right? Especially today, in today's times. I think it's important. So what is your key, in your recovery messaging when you're talking, what is your key recovery message?
Who I am today and what recovery has given me.
Right. You're advocating for recovery. You're talking about recovery is real and it's possible, right? People in recovery contribute to society. We just talked about all those things that we do, right? We own homes, we pay taxes, we vote, we bring value to communities. People in recovery have come through something very difficult and are doing well and thriving. I love that. We are thriving in recovery, right? When we find recovery, we thrive. I love that. Anything else that you think is key to your recovery messaging?
I mean, for me, recovery has taught me how to be a better person, a kinder person, a person who cares about others and a person who cares about society and the planet. And I didn't necessarily have those qualities before I got into recovery. Like, I am a very, very different person. And I'm not sure the best way to say that, but I think for me that seems like an important message too, for people that know, you know, people in active addiction and think that that's who they are. It isn't.
Right, and that's right, Carrie. I think in active addiction, very hard to think about others, right? Because we're consumed with addiction. And then we get into recovery and we do think about others and we are in, you know, it's not all about us all the time. We can certainly show empathy to others and be kind to others. So great. Anybody else?
I try to spread the message of we're not bad people, we're sick.
Right, that's great.
You know?
Right, and comparing it to other illnesses often, I do that as well, Matt. You know, I think about when we think about this and we compare it to other illnesses, people, you know, would people be talking or be so there'd be so much stigma if it was somebody that had cancer, or but would people be more sympathetic to that? So, you know, I try to compare it to other illnesses as well. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what do you think, what is not in the message? Because it's really important that we know the difference about what is in the message and what's not in the message. So we've talked a lot about the things that are in the message. What are some of the things that are not in the message?
Mess.
The mess, yes. Leave the mess.
Out of the message.
That's good. Yes, keep the mess out of message. So some of the things that are not in the message, and just especially when you're speaking really at like a recovery event, I would say really try to be mindful not to just keep these things out of the message. It's again, identifying as an alcoholic or an addict, And this is why when people hear these words, and we talked about this already, it reinforces the idea of a revolving door of continuing relapse. When Matt identified as an alcoholic and addict in the first few slides, right away, we don't know what his recovery status is. We don't know if he's in recovery. We don't know if he's struggling with addiction. We just don't know. So to eliminate any of that not knowing, when we don't use this language. So information about a particular pathway. We don't promote any pathway to recovery. We can talk about that there's many pathways to recovery, but we're not speaking as a representative from any of those pathways. Like to speak that I'm representing 12-step or another pathway, we don't get involved in that as well. We don't represent that, so we don't promote that. A definition of recovery. If I asked, I don't know, there's 6 people on this call. If I asked 6 people for a definition of recovery, I get 6 different answers. So we try not to get involved in that. I've heard many times that people will say, you know, because somebody may not be working the steps, or somebody may not be going to meetings as much, or somebody may not be doing certain things. Often I've heard people say they're not really in recovery, and what, so we don't want to give a definition of what that looks like. We don't want to define that. There's a couple of rules of thumb. I know if people have done the Recovery Coach Academy, the definition at the Recovery Coach Academy is you're in recovery when you say you are. So it's very short. It's like not putting a definition on anybody else. If somebody says they're in recovery, they're in recovery. Addiction is a disease, or a health problem. Many people do not believe it's a disease or a health problem. And although sharing experience is more powerful than engaging in this discussion. So although we did just talk about the disease piece of it, Matt, a minute ago about comparing it to other things, it's often an argument that when you're giving a recovery message, it's try not to engage in a discussion where people to disagree. Whenever I get to that point in a message where somebody's like, it's a choice, and I'm like, no, really, it's not a choice, addiction. And I can feel that going like this. I've learned to just end in, well, I'm living proof, because that's a great word. You can't argue with I'm living proof, so I just try not to get in. Part of that message is not getting caught up in things like definitions or arguing about if it's a disease or a choice kind of thing with people as well. Marianne, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I want to thank you for really affirming what the letter. It's just not worth the argument, because somebody's going to get information saying that it's a disease. Somebody else is going to get information about a health problem. And I might believe it's a disease, but it's more important that we share our experience, because as somebody said earlier, that provides the hope, that provides the proof that change is possible.
Right. Thank you, Marianne. The experience is really important. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's some words that we're talking about that we should abandon when we're doing the message. These are also things that we should avoid saying. And these are words that we should abandon in the recovery messaging, like clean and dirty. I think I'm speaking to the choir. Everybody here on this call knows why we don't do that, right? Clean and dirty, right? So, I'm clean now, so what was I, dirty then? It just is not, it keeps the stigma alive, right? We don't use substance abuse anymore, it's substance use. We even know, the Bureau of Substance Addiction Services used to be called the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services, and they've changed their name as well. Self-help. Does anybody have any idea like why we would stay away from that word?
basically saying kind of, I got to help myself get over it. Ain't that bad. Put it down.
Right. And also, like, when we're talking to like people that could potentially fund certain programs, we use that, why would I fund it? Why would I fund that? There's self-help.
Right.
Right? You can help yourself. Untreated alcoholic, untreated addict. Again, if we're looking at any other disease model, we wouldn't identify it like, he's on untreated cancer or untreated diabetic. So,
Right.
those are just words that we just don't want to use. The language of self-pity. Again, does anybody have any, anything else that you would like, any other words that, because again, things are always changing and we always are coming up with new things not to do or to say that, to elevate or to abandon different words. Are there any other words that you can think of or other things that people say that we could add to this list? All right. So there's some words, we talked about the ones to abandon, but there's also some that we'd like to discuss in debate. Oh, did I go too far? Sorry about that. So words, concepts, and recovery messaging to discuss and debate. So these are things that need a little more discussion. Like when we yell, I remember many years ago at a recovery walk, many years ago, we made a lot of signs saying treatment works. We had those and we thought that's what we were rallying for. Treatment works. And treatment does work, but it doesn't work for everybody. So that's why we have to start looking at some of these words that we're pushing and we say, is that, should we use that if it's not working for everybody? Some people have gone to treatment many times and it just hasn't worked, So what about consumer? What's that feel like?
Not good.
I don't like consumer. I feel like consumer, I know that it is sort of more in popular usage now or has been rather than use like client or patient or whatever. But I feel like for me, like my reaction to the word consumer is like it's a financial exchange, and I think to me, it feels like it's not an authentic way of representing what people are seeking from treatment, but also what we as people who support people with addiction are providing.
Yeah.
I don't like the word consumer.
But
I'm not sure like if that means that it shouldn't be used. So it's just kind of like my personal response to it is
Yeah.
kind of negative.
And that's why it's about, discuss and debate, for some people it's fine, for other people, no. I might not like it because it makes me think I'm still consuming.
Right. I always feel like it's the Pac-Man. You remember Pac-Man and that thing just ate all the things? That's what consumer means. And it just means like, to me, it means like somebody that takes, like consumes, uses, takes. And I know people in recovery are about the most giving people that I've ever met in my life. So consumer just doesn't seem like it's it just seems like it's you're using or taking, and I feel the same way. Thanks, Carrie. Stigma, enable, relapse, recovering or recovered. How do these words just add some discussion to it?
I definitely try not to use the word enable. I find that it does kind of tie back to some 12-step programs, and it's kind of like saying, well, you're not doing the right thing because you're enabling someone. I try to turn it around and say something like, try using different language, try being supportive but having boundaries.
Right.
I agree with you, Lori. I think that sometimes people use the word enabling to just cover for a whole bunch of different actions. And a lot of those actions are support, and support in ways that maybe you know, 12-step programs traditionally aren't comfortable with or advise against. But like, I've, you know, being at NOAA for a little while and realizing that we're, you know, the kind of support and the scope or amount of support that we're willing to offer, it's not enabling. It's just complete unconditional support. And to call that, or to call something that looks like that or whatever, enabling someone, I think really misses the mark on what caring for other people is. And I agree with Lori on that one. It's support with boundaries. I like that. It's a good way of reframing it.
Right. Yeah, I like that too, Lori. Thank you. What about recovered? I used to say, when I was director of Everyday Miracles and we were just getting this recovery messaging going, I used to love to challenge people with this. I love to get a good debate together. You know, if anybody knows me, I'd always like to get a good conversation going or a good debate. I always used to talk about this recovering and recovered, because we had all recovery meetings, and I would hear sometimes people say, you know, I'll be in recovery for the rest of my life. And I'd say, well, I've recovered. And people would be like, oh, you can't say that. And I would have this conversation with them. And, you know, but I would love to get the debates going. So sometimes if anybody really knows me, I always am throwing those just to get conversations going. I use this example of a gun. I've told the story several times before about, like, if I get shot, like if I get a bullet wound and I go to the hospital, I recover from that bullet wound, but it doesn't make me bulletproof. So I've recovered from the bullet wound, but it doesn't make me bulletproof. So, you know, if it's about like obsession and compulsion, then I've recovered. Yeah, you know, so I've had those conversations, but I love just to debate and get these conversations, because it's important to have these conversations. It really is. So much comes from these conversations, you know, instead of just going along with the way things have always been, because that's not working. So we have to make change, and we've got to have these discussions. So there's some words, those are words to discuss and debate. And there's certainly some words that we need to elevate and celebrate. So those are words like recovery community, communities of recovery, advocacy, sustainability, recovery support services, recovery coaches, recovery-oriented systems of care, living proof. I said that earlier. That puts an end to everything, any argument. I'm living proof. Recovery stories, that's great. We all have them, and we should tell them as often as we can. Responsibility, gratitude, service, and tolerance. What do you think about that? Any other words you want to add to this list?
Pathways.
Multiple pathways, right. How about Marianne's big, her vocal visual, say it, Marianne. I can't say it.
Vocal, valuable, and now virtual.
Yeah, those are all the words we should celebrate, because we're valuable, we're visual, we're vocal, pay taxes, we vote, goes on and on.
Right, right.
So we're gonna practice a couple. Is everybody ready to practice a couple of recovery messaging techniques? So here's a couple. I'm gonna go first, if you don't mind. I can't see. Did you guys change? Do you guys see a change in the screen, or do you still see the PowerPoint?
No, it changed.
We can see it, but it's like it's not the slideshow version.
Okay, let me get out of that. I'm sorry, I'm doing too many things here at once. So I had my recovery message up there. So my name is, can you see it now, the PowerPoint?
No.
Oh, what happened?
Wow.
I'm gonna go first then, anyway, while I'm figuring out. My name is Athena, and I'm in long-term recovery, which means I haven't used drugs since 1993. I'm committed to recovery because it's given me new purpose and hope for the future, while it's helped me gain stability for my life. I'm now speaking out because recovery has helped me change my life for the better, and I want to make it possible for others to do the same. Can you see that now?
Yeah, we can see it. If you just click
Oh.
slideshow, play from current slide, then it will be back to usual.
Oh, I didn't do what you said. Sorry.
You're
There we
so
go.
You
smart.
never do what I say. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so that was mine. Who wants to take a shot next? And
I'll
you
go.
can just do whatever you want or use any of those examples below.
All right, I'll go. My name is Lori, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery, which to me means that I have not used alcohol for over 8 years. Recovery has totally changed who I am and how I feel about the world. I've been able to accomplish my goals and develop positive relationships. I can communicate with others and support others in their own recovery. I'm speaking out so others may have the opportunity to achieve long-term recovery as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Who wants to jump in?
I'll go.
Okay.
My name is Mariana. I'm in recovery, which means for me, I haven't used alcohol or any other drugs since 1981. Recovery has given me new hope and stability, which means for me, from being scared, lost, and lonely, I now have a lot of faith and hope and energy. I've been able to create a better life for myself, my family, and my community. And what that means is, instead of being so isolated and so like complaining about the world, I really got the experience of looking for mentors. It really helped me to learn to find my voice, speak out, so that others may have an opportunity to achieve long-term recovery. That's why I do more.
Thank you, Marianne.
You're welcome.
Who wants to take a shot at it?
I'm glad I went before Marianne.
It's always a tough act to follow, I know. Yeah, so I told you she's the biggest cheerleader for recovery I know. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? All right, do we think we got it? We're ready for your recovery event?
Cool. You're all gonna be stars, the recovery star, the NOAA recovery stars.
And you're gonna practice on all those people, your family, your friends, your neighbors, business owners. You're gonna practice, so you have several weeks to practice before your event.
Absolutely.
There's also a message for family members. So take this home to your families. I put some of, these are the Learn to Cope families right here in this picture. I changed some of the pictures, Marianne, on this training.
I know. You're not supposed to do that, but you did a great job. I love it. It's great.
Pictures were like people I didn't know and they weren't family. So I said, I'm going to put a family member in there. All right, so I know people know these people from NOAA. That's why I put this here. You know,
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. So anyways, so an example of recovery messaging. So this is for family members. So go home and tell your family that they too can practice recovery messaging, and say things like, my mother is in recovery. My name is so-and-so and my family and I are in recovery, which means my mother hasn't or my son hasn't, so there it is. You can also, because families recover together as well, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
That's why they say, I'm learning to cope, and that means you're using no cope, or I'll wash your mouth with soap.
Love it. Love it.
So, yeah, and so, I think about my mother back, in 93, there was a lot of stigma, and she just didn't have, she didn't have something like this to talk. It was a lot of shame. She's 90 and she still doesn't like to talk about those days, but, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. So, where are we? So applying your message and review. Preparation is key. You guys practice on each other, and that's fine. Practice on each other. And it's important. Have 2 or 3 points supported by examples. I've heard a lot of things that people have gained in recovery. Those are your examples. Use those as examples. Stick to your message. don't offer the side or the platform of a platform by bringing up their position. We talked about that where it's like another position like disease or choice, or certain pathways. Stick to the message. Don't offer the other side. Everything you say should state or reinforce your message. So it's okay to keep going back. I remember watching, they had this recovery messaging on a CD many years ago through Faces and Voices, something like this. And there was a Tom Kadir at the time. He was on that video, but I remember him interviewing a woman, and he kept saying things like, "Oh, you're a recovering addict? Tell me about the horrors of addiction." Like, because people want to hear that, but that's not recovery messaging. And it's so easy to get caught up in, oh my God, let me tell you, I used to sleep on park benches. I used to do, so much, this or that or that or that. And it's easy to get caught up into that. And we're no longer talking about a recovery messaging. We're doing some other messaging. So really, always don't be that. If somebody wants to take you down that path, and sometimes it happens with the press. Sometimes if you may have the press at your event, and they might want to talk to one of you when you get off after you speak, and they may want to talk about you, and they might want to talk about a little bit about addiction. And don't go down that, just bring it right back. Like, yes, addiction was horrific, but I want to tell you about recovery. Don't be afraid to bring that back around to the recovery message all the time, So don't be afraid to repeat yourself. Do it as many times as you have to. You want to be sure that everything from your message is used in the interview or the presentation. Remember, this is your recovery message.
Fantastic. Wow.
I remember one time, Marianne, that the Boston Recovery Day event, I decided to take the train into Boston for that day. And when I got back, coming back on the train, they had the metro, and it was after the big event we had. We went from Government Center, we walked to State House, we went up into the big, I forget that room's name, is it the
Gardner Auditorium.
Gardner Auditorium. We filled the place, and it was a big, exciting day. It was all about recovery, and people, really excited. And I got on the train to go back to Worcester, and they had the metro. I grabbed it in the train station, and there was it's a 2-page paper. It's a very small little paper that goes to the train. And it was something about Boston's Recovery Day, and it was a picture of a needle and a spoon on the cover of that. That's not recovery. That's not what I had just been at the Recovery Day, and I didn't see a needle or spoon anywhere. It did not represent Recovery Day. So that's really important. So don't be afraid to repeat yourself over and over again. Stay on your story. Keep it to recovery. And I know some people are calling out people. And Hope for Holyoke no longer lets a certain news station in their center to cover any news about recovery because they don't get it right. They can always put the needle in the spoon with the message. So they decided not to even do any stories with them anymore until they get it right. So
we want the positive value of recovery out there.
Yep. So any questions?
No, Athena,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I remember, geez, I don't even know how many years ago it was, but when we were talking something about this, but I don't think, well, you weren't at MOAR yet, so it wasn't during our workshop or anything. So, but I remember you saying that when someone like publicly speaks and they talk about like the trenches of their addiction of, being homeless or in and out of jail, different things like that, that's what the person is going to hear, is that negative impact and not the positives behind it. And same with the news, just like you were saying, there was no needles and spoons laying around, but when they hear recovery from substance use, boom, that's where that press or I can't think of what they're called, the writer, that's where their mindset went with the stigma around addiction rather than seeing like all the positives. So by us sharing our positives only brings that much more light for not to have that negative be involved in it.
Right. Yeah. And if the press is at your event, just it's okay to say that too. Like, listen, it's important that you cover the recovery event, not the addiction event. This is not an, yeah. So make sure when you're speaking to them that before you even answer a question, make sure they're looking through it through a recovery lens, not an active addiction lens. How's that? How's that? Y'all ready to?
I just wanted to ask one question. It might not even be a question, but I know with overdose awareness coming up, and people, men and women in recovery, speaking to families who've lost people to overdoses, and it's just got me thinking about that. How it can go both ways. It could be very painful, or it can be a very powerful piece speaking to people who've lost someone to addiction. Yeah, I don't know really what my question is. I know for me, it's going to be my first time, so I guess you can just say the fear is kind of coming around, and what do I say? And so, yeah.
So,
again, I don't know what the question was, but.
So I think the last couple of years, haven't the vigils been a little separate, like around recovery, and they've been a place? Because I know the DA in Worcester last year, we really weren't invited, like MOAR and all the people with the stuff, because they wanted to keep it for that, not have recovery resources for families that have lost loved ones. Are they still doing it like that, Rebecca?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's more about like learn to cope and the supports for the families.
Right.
And same with like the speakers. It's, there may be someone who identifies that they're in recovery themselves, but they're there for the remembering their loved one that they lost.
Yeah.
So they don't have like recovery speakers or anything like that.
Right. All right.
Or resources for recovery. Just doesn't make sense.
Right. All right. So
Noah, just to put it out there. So Noah, we're new in the Blackstone Valley area in Whitensville, and we put together our first annual overdose vigil last year, like 2 weeks after our walk. And we just like threw it together really quick just to bring awareness and let our community know that like support is available, which stemmed off to two moms starting a parent grief group that they both lost their adult children. And, so we're doing our second one, but the speakers that are at the vigil are a lot different than at our recovery walk.
Yeah, that makes sense, Rebecca. Yeah.
It does. That's great. Excellent. Very good things. You're just proving no one walks alone. Absolutely.
All right. Does anybody have anything else to add? Or, oh, I do, and I'm going to put it in the chat. It's about advocating with anonymity. Marianne, is that a good thing to put in the chat for folks if they want?
You can. It's dated, but it's good. It still has the same message to it.
So it's about, some people that go to 12-step and things, they think that if they're speaking out about recovery, they're violating one of the traditions in the, oh God, I won't even be able to find this thing now. I might not even be able to find it.
Right.
Oh, here it is. Hold on. I got it. Okay, I'm putting it in the chat right now. It's a PDF, but it's advocating. If you guys want to take it and download it, feel free. But that's about, a lot of people from 12-step think that if they're speaking out against, or they're speaking out about recovery, they're violating one of the traditions. And it's usually, I think, tradition like 6, 10, and 11 or something like that. I forget. But anyways, that will tell, that's a piece of literature that will help folks that think that when they're speaking out, they're violating the tradition.
The only tradition you would be breaking is if you said, I go to AA,
Right.
you know, but it's also a choice. No one should be forced either.
I always say, after a little while, I made a point of meeting some other people in recovery,
Wow.
getting some support.
That's
It just
great,
like,
Lori.
it just comes, every single time I tell my story and I get to that point, that's what pops into my head, because I'm trying not to like push people away, you know?
Very good. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
What's your date for your recovery day? I think you
I don't
told
see
me
that in the chat.
September 12th.
Yeah. Marianne is speaking.
Yes,
I knew
yes,
that.
yeah. Thank you. That's nice of you to ask.
Awesome.
Athena, I don't see it in the chat. Did you send that?
I did. It's the advocacy with it. I'll do it again. There it is right there. You don't see it?
I haven't, I can forward it to you. I downloaded it onto my,
Are you on your
my,
phone, Matt? Maybe it's because you're on your phone.
yeah.
Yeah, Carrie, please
I'll
do.
send it to your, family continuity email.
Thank you.
Terry, can you send it to all of us so
Sure.
we can like print it and have it at the center?
Okay.
Shoot it over here.
Good.
So,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you
I
very much.
really appreciate that.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Practice on each other. Practice, practice. Remember, that was one of the keys. Be prepared.
I'm gonna go
I
drive my
really
15-year-old son crazy tonight.
I
Next session.
appreciate the family pot being in at the end of that. Like that is that's something I'm going to share with my wife, and because she wants to be able to talk about recovery and the family base of it, and she struggles with it. So
Wow.
thank you.
That's
Well, we
great.
have the tools now.
Awesome.
Tools.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. I want you to get